One of the things that's withheld and is in the JFK collection right now is the testimony of James Angleton in 1975 to the Church Committee about the Israeli nuclear program. This is a 113-page document, and it's heavily redacted to this day. And the redactions clearly pertain to Israel. Now, is this an assassination-related document? Absolutely. The Assassination Records Review Board said this is an assassination-related document. It meets the statutory definition. If the president and this effort are serious, that testimony will be declassified because Angleton controlled the Oswald file on the one hand, and he was a contact with the Israelis on the other. So it belongs in the public record. That's another test of, is this serious effort?
So let me ask you, why in the world would the Dimona project, the Israeli nuclear program, which has never officially been admitted by anybody but Israel, what would that conceivably have to do with the assassination of JFK?
Well, it relates to what Angleton was doing in 1963. There were profound conflicts between Israel and the Kennedy White House over the nuclear program. Kennedy was pressing for on-site inspections, which the Israelis resisted because on-site inspections would have realized that they had a bomb-making program. So this was a real bone of contention between the Israeli government and the Kennedy administration in the summer of 1963. At a time when Angleton controlled the Oswald file. So just the juxtaposition of those facts means that everything about it should be on the public record.
And Angleton, who is the counter-intel chief at CIA, James Jesus Angleton, he... That's quite amazing. Did he support... Do you know his view of the Israeli nuclear program?
I mean, it's very hard to tell sometimes from this testimony, given all the redactions. But yeah, that's, was he secretly supporting Israel against JFK? That's one of the questions that needs to be answered by full disclosure.
So why would he be asked about that in a congressional hearing? That's quite amazing.
Well, because in 1975, the CIA had been revealed to be running assassination programs, to be running a mind control program, to be spying on the anti-war movement, spying on Americans. So he was hauled before, and Congress, who was completely in the dark, had been duped or wanted to be duped. Suddenly their eyes woke up and they had to explain to their constituents, hey, what have these guys been doing in our name? And so Angleton was called in, and this was all, executive session testimony. So he was grilled about lots of things, about domestic spying, about the Israeli nuclear program, about the JFK assassination. Interestingly enough, he was not questioned about Oswald because even the Church Committee did not know the extent of the pre-assassination surveillance of Oswald. That's only something we've learned since the 1990s.
It is interesting. I mean, I have no idea what the truth is, of course, but it is interesting that one of the only major policy changes that Lyndon Johnson made in the year after the president's murder was on the Israeli nuclear program, which he accepted.
Basically, he dropped the demand for on-site inspections. He dropped the demand that AIPAC be classified as a domestic lobby, and there was really no accountability after that. And the story only emerged, 10 years later when the Church Committee started pressing Angleton for some explanations.
So I had no idea until you just told me that was actually a feature of those hearings. And so, of course, I mean, the American public has an absolute right to know what's in that exchange 50 years later. And this is a tough call for the president because he's going to get very strong pushback from his national security apparatus, supported by the CIA, supported by Israeli interests, to say, no, you can't talk about that. That's not permitted. Don't do that.
You remember me recounting the conversation I had with Trump, which is almost 4 years ago to the day. What do you think he could have been referring to, Larry?
Well, I think one possibility, Ryan Dawson's done an excellent video on this. It's an hour and a half long. It could implicate Israel at the time because, a month before Kennedy's assassination, Robert F. Kennedy sent a letter to the Zionist Organization of America, which was a predecessor for AIPAC, informing them that they were going to be required to register as foreign agents. They didn't like that. Kennedy was also authorizing the CIA to expand its investigation of the theft of uranium from Pennsylvania that had been used to construct Israel's first illegal nuclear weapon at Dimona. Then there are the established ties between the Jewish mafia at the time, Meyer Lansky, and the Italian mob, who both had incentives in terms of what the Kennedys did in Cuba and Robert F. Kennedy's own campaign going after organized crime. So that's a possibility. The case that Ryan lays out is it's well documented. It's not, off the wall. But there's lots of people with lots of motives. We can go down, other potential conspiracies. But that's the point. Let's get the actual evidence, put it out there. Maybe it's something pretty pedestrian but embarrassing. Maybe it does directly implicate the CIA itself in having killed Kennedy.
Let's talk about JFK. I want you to pay very close attention to these two clips that were spaced years apart and then hear what I have to say.
Said, you made a promise to the public many times and to me privately that you haven't kept. What? I'll take care of it right now. I said, you promised you would release the records of the JFK assassination. He said to me, Judge, if they showed you what they showed me, you wouldn't have released it either. And I said, who's they and what did they show you? And then he said, Judge, someday when we're on the phone, and then he raised his voice, and there aren't 15 people listening to the phone call, back to a normal voice, I'll tell you. I mean, this makes it sound even worse. Who are they? Probably somebody in the intelligence community. What did they show him? JFK's brains blown out?
The last administration promised to comply fully with that law, but under intense pressure from CIA Director Mike Pompeo, withheld in the end thousands of pages of CIA documents. Today, this afternoon, the Biden administration did exactly the same thing. That would be thousands of pages of documents after nearly 60 years, after the death of every single person involved. But we still can't see them. Clearly, it's not to protect any person. They're all dead. It's to protect an institution. But why? Well, today we decided to find out. We spoke to someone who had access to these still hidden CIA documents, a person who was deeply familiar with what they contain. We asked this person directly, did the CIA have a hand in the murder of John F. Kennedy, an American president? And here's the reply we received verbatim. Quote, the answer is yes. I believe they were involved. It's a whole different country from what we thought it was. It's all fake. It's hard to imagine a more jarring response than that. Again, this is not a, quote, conspiracy theorist that we spoke to. Not even close. This is someone with direct knowledge of the information that once again is being withheld from the American public.
When asked about the CIA's involvement, he said, yes, I believe so. What do you mean you believe so? You know so. You've seen the documents. It's a whole different country than what we thought. That's not Cuba. That's Israel. He knows the Israelis had Kennedy killed. He believes the CIA let it happen. But it's interesting. And for those of you who wondering, well, why do you think it's a conspiracy? If Lee Harvey Oswald did that all by himself, there wouldn't be thousands of classified files still 61 years later. November 24th, 1963, J. Edgar Hoover said, the thing I am concerned about, and so is Mr. Katzenbach, is having something issued so that we can convince the public that Oswald is the real assassin. Why say the real assassin? Odd. Also, Trump decided not to release the rest over concerns for foreign affairs. Oh, gee, I wonder what country that could be. Probably the same one Jack Ruby was running guns to. The files that were released are a bit redundant in that we knew this information already from the United States Attorney General Katzenbach himself. It's interesting because Nick Katzenbach, who Hoover is referring to, himself wrote the next day in a memo to Bill Moyer, "The public must be satisfied that Oswald was the assassin, that he had no Confederates who were still at large, and that the evidence was such that he would have been convicted at trial." Huh. Is there anyone we know who's involved who, I don't know, might belong to a particular ethnic group that completely lost his mind talking to the Warren Commission, paranoid that if the truth ever came out that there would be another pogrom on his people? Huh. Jack Ruby, yeah, Jacob Rubenstein, who said, "The Jewish people are being exterminated at this moment. Consequently, a whole new form of government is going to take over our country, and I know I won't live to see you another time." What a weird thing to say. I am used as a scapegoat, and there is no greater weapon that you can use to create some falsehood about some of the Jewish faith, especially at the terrible, heinous crimes such as killing President Kennedy. And then I want to leave this world, but I don't want my people to be blamed for something that is untrue, that they claim has happened. There's a lot more of this type of thing in his testimony to the Warren Commission. It's all on my Substack. But Jack Ruby is completely paranoid that they've already been told the plot, that it will lead back to the state of Israel. And so he's losing it and saying, well, it's a setup. They're going to be blamed. And he's just begging them, and he tries to blame the John Birch Society and all this other nonsense. But when he keeps saying his people, he means the Jewish people. The Kennedys knew that Israel had nuclear weapons, that they had built them illegally, that they had stolen uranium from the United States. They wanted to register all of Israel's lobbies as foreign agents, and Robert Kennedy supported Palestinian right of return. All these documents and more on Ruby and his friends are over on my Substack. I haven't talked about JFK in a while, decided to this year. I don't like putting up with the kook movement. Ruby's all over the place. Israel had the motives. They had the men in place. They had the expendables. It's not that complicated. And there's a reason why there's thousands of files that are still classified. There's a reason why Trump would tell Judge Knapp, if you knew what was in there, you wouldn't release them. Who are you protecting? Trump certainly doesn't like the CIA, especially now the Justice Department went after him too. Everybody went after him with lawfare. He wants to gut them. That's why he's bringing Matt Gaetz in as the Attorney General. And he said it would mess with foreign affairs. Huh. Everybody now has to know it's not the Cubans. Johnson's policy on Cuba didn't change. It wasn't because he was about to get out of Vietnam. Kennedy and McNamara procured millions and millions of dollars for profiteering in Vietnam. He's the one that started Vietnam. It's not because he didn't give air support to the Bay of Pigs, because he did. There wasn't the ground support the CIA claimed they had, though, because the weapons that were supposed to be there had been diverted to Israel. That's another story. Same thing with Iran-Contra. It was the Israelis helping the contraband for that. There's a lot here. And I see people sloganeer and be like, well, Israel killed JFK, but they can't back it up. I can. Join the Substack. Peace.